On vous avait proposé aujourd'hui des approches, des visions différentes de l'engagement. On a eu une approche sur, dans le domaine des jeux avec Léonard. Éric vient nous le présenter dans le domaine professionnel. On veut maintenant passer à un moment où on veut vous inspirer en retournant dans l'histoire. On a la chance unique d'avoir avec nous un chercheur qui, pour nous a beaucoup inspiré dans l'amorce de nos travaux, qui a beaucoup inspiré Leonard. So it's a great honor to have the chance to have with us today Dr. Alan Pope, a research scientist at NASA. So I'm going to read a few words about his bio so you understand the context of Dr. Pope's presentation today. So Alan Pope is an engineer and a psychologist, has been conducting manned systems engineering research as a research scientist at NASA Langley Research Center since 1980. Dr. Pope's research is aimed at developing human response measurement technology to assess the effect of advanced crew station concept on the crew's ability to perform flight management tasks effectively. He originated the scientific study of hazardous awareness state in monitoring environment and physiological-based adaptive automation. Since 1995, he has conducted research and published articles and book chapters developing his concept of bio-cybernetic adaptation. Dr. Pope is inventor of over 25 inventions and holds 10 U.S. patents in the field of psychology, modulated simulation, virtual reality in games, and aviation synthetic vision system. He was awarded in 1998 the American Institute of Aeronautic and Astronautic Contribution to Society Award, the 2000 NASA Exceptional Achievement Medal, the DARPA 2006 Foundation of Augmented Cognition Award, the 2012 NASA Exceptional Service Medal, 2013 NASA Langley Technology Transfer Mentor of the Year. So as you understand, his research has been fundamental to setting the stage to this, right? And his research has been influential for us, even though we're not in the same field, but studying how humans behave in a context where hazard is important. His study, and specifically some metrics that Dr. Pope has been using. We're using it in our research. Patrick Charlin is using it. So a lot of people, contemporary research is basing their work on Dr. Pope, and it's really an honor to have you with us today. Thank you very much for making the trip. Thank you.
I guess my greeting would be, hi y'all. Since I'm originally from Tennessee, that's our colloquialism. I want to talk about engagement in our context, and our users are pilots. And what we're interested in doing is making the situation better for them in a number of ways. In one way, we want to make it better by designing better cockpits, better flight deck instrumentation, better controls and that kind of thing, better procedures. The other way is that we want to help them be better, and I'll make a point about that. Training for attention management. Teach them to manage their own attention, their ability to sustain attention. So the user here is the pilot. Oops. And I'm going to cover this in three parts. First, the background, which is kind of a history, because sometimes the way I put it is that I'm history. There is a current staff that are taking this forward at NASA Langley. And then I want to talk about the development of a method for evaluating task engagement indices. And this is engagement with a specific task, not just engagement in general. And our paper in '95 covered that topic. And then I want to talk about the current research that's in progress that is involving a number of people in addition to myself. So I was brought to NASA Langley for a particular purpose, and that was to apply physiological measurements to the evaluation of pilots and crew to try to determine how to better design things to make their experience more effective for carrying out their task. And so this proposal back in 82 was my initial research mandate, which we wrote up. And the idea was to have, it's kind of represented by this ghost figure, an entity that's monitoring what the pilot is doing physiologically, internally, as well as overtly. So it was really gratifying to me to see this paper in this year, 33 years later, that deals with estimating state in a flight simulator. I didn't realize it was going to take this long for this to become of interest to folks, but I'm really gratified by that. These are folks that have worked with one of the major airframers. So the background starts with the objective, the goal of our aeronautics research, and we at NASA Langley are the first A in NASA. There's space, and space comes after us in the name. So National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And so we focus on trying to improve the airspace system over its already high level of safety. And that's because accidents primarily are due to human error, and we're looking at some aspects that lead to human error. This is not another person.
You're asking the pilot to do something that the human does worst, and that is maintain attention over a long period of time to something that's essentially boring.
Pilots admit complacency can lead to dangerous mistakes in the cockpit.
And then if he's relaxed.
So psychologists at NASA Langley are trying to determine when pilots tune in and tune out by brain mapping. Electrodes attached to a test subject's scalp measure brain waves during flight.
What we're doing can be thought of as staging waking consciousness, because we go through various states of awareness, even in waking consciousness.
Collect the data.
This computer combines statistics and wave readings to create these maps of the brain's electrical activity. Psychologists can see when subjects are alert and when they're not, and they hope it will lead to automation that supports pilots.
As the individual lapses into a hazardous state of awareness, the system becomes less automatic, requires them to get back engaged, to get back involved in what's going on. And then as they get back engaged, then the system starts taking over the task and takes over more and more of it.
So what I'm describing there at the end is a concept that we introduced called adaptive automation, using physiological measures as the basis for adaptation. And the reason we're interested in that is because automation has overcome one challenge that was predominant when I started the work, and that is high workload or excessive workload in the cockpit. That was overcome so much that the flip side started becoming a problem: underload, boredom, and these kinds of states, which we saw in the Aviation Safety Reporting System database. So we were interested in, okay, how much automation is too much? How can we determine that using physiological measures? And so we came up with the concept of hazardous states of awareness, and this paper is an SAE paper in '92, 10 years later. And we developed a visualization of what we meant by hazardous states of awareness. This console right here would be the desirable active monitoring that you would want an operator to do. This is not bad also, kind of focused. But then when it becomes excessive, where they're oblivious to everything other than one aspect of the environment, we refer to that as absorbed. And the new term for our new research group is called channelized attention. It's coined by someone else. And then, of course, there's the preoccupation with things outside the current context. Okay, so once we got the idea that we needed to look at this, we thought, okay, what we're going to need is a metric, a way to assess, a way to track in real time what a person's level of engagement was. And so task engagement over the years has been developed and has been defined in a number of ways. Questionnaires in one case, task demands, how much task demand subjectively evaluated by the experimenter is being imposed on the individual, and also psychophysiological measures have been suggested as a way to look at task engagement. The way we look at it is to close the loop of the interaction, the human-computer interaction. And it's particularly dynamic in that when we close the loop, we have the person interacting with the task, but also their brainwave activity, in this case, interacting with the task and modulating the task as their brainwave activity is changing and as they're interacting with the task. So this is basically an operationalization of the task engagement construct that has to do with the back and forth between brainwave activity and the task. So we started out by looking in the literature and determined that there was a way to create a candidate engagement index by looking at these measures of beta, alpha, and theta in the brainwave, and then creating this ratio. You can see how those shift, how the contribution to vigilance, in this case, shifts over the range of frequencies in the brainwave. And this is a very old animation that kind of illustrates the way we went about it. And this is the idea behind the 1995 paper. Let's see if we get this on. Okay. So what you're seeing here is the way things work. The person is interacting with a task. It switches from automated, and the EEG actually drops out of the back. Not really. Just we record it, and this was our way of indicating that you first get the EEG and transform it, and then make a decision about how much automation to present to the person. And so that's what I mean by closed loop in this context. And in order to use that for evaluation, we looked at how the system operated under two different contingencies. One, a negative contingency in which loss of engagement indicated by the engagement index triggered increased task demand, which meant that when a person becomes disengaged from the system, it pulls them back in by giving them something more to do. When they are engaged enough, then the system will then become automated and let them have a rest period. So what you see is this oscillation between automation and manual, and an oscillation in the engagement index. If you turn that around and you create a positive contingency where loss of engagement triggers decreased task demand, you just make the situation worse. As a person becomes less engaged, then the system becomes more automated. And so they have less to do, and they become increasingly disengaged, and you see this kind of behavior. Now, this is based upon the idea in feedback control systems of deviation controlling feedback, and this is called deviation amplifying feedback. In other words, it's a situation you don't want to occur, but what we were interested in doing is trying various candidate indices, including that one that I mentioned in the previous slide, to see how well they showed this particular contrast between positive and negative feedback. And the one that showed that the best, we claimed was the best index that we were looking at so far. And we didn't test every index, we just tested a set. So since then, there have been studies looking at the engagement index. There have been some individuals have actually looked at the EEG in game design. And recently, 2015, 14, and 13, the engagement index has been compared to other ways of measuring engagement, and also how it reacts under vigilance tasks, gameplay, and daydreaming. And in some cases, it turns out to be valuable and useful, like in the first and third here. But sometimes there are problems that it doesn't address, it doesn't look at. This is an an example of looking at this kind of thing in the flight deck. This was also several years ago. We were using brain mapping, and what this person is going to do is adapt the automation to their brainwaves, but not in an automated fashion, because at this point we didn't have it hooked into the simulator. So what he's done is set the flight simulator on autopilot. His hands are on the console, so he has nothing to do. And our engagement index drops through several levels as he becomes more disengaged. And then he's given the instruction to disengage auto throttles, which is speed controls, just that part of autopilot. And then when he does that, you'll see the engagement index then increases. So what you see here is a kind of a very simplified version of this feedback control. It's not automated feedback, but it is changing the task that the pilot has to do and watching its effect on this engagement index that we defined. I thought I also mentioned some spin-offs from this attention and engagement research. Once we had a measure, we tried to think of things to do with it other than use it in the flight simulator. And so we thought about, well, what's like a flight simulator? Well, video games or flights are like flight simulators. In fact, flight simulators are kind of video games for grown-ups, I guess. So we came up with the idea, and this again is quite dated, with the idea of using this as a biofeedback, in this case neurofeedback, training technology for ADHD. And let's see if I can find this, okay.
Clinical psychologist Oliver Powson has been conducting a study with Pope's invention. 11 children with ADHD are receiving traditional brainwave biofeedback, and 11 are using the video game method. At the start of each training session, special EEG sensors are attached to the patient's scalp. The sensors pick up brainwaves which are relayed to the video game's controller.
Video games difficulty, the video game's responsiveness to their inputs is adjusted according to what they're producing in brainwaves. As they produce brainwaves that indicate more attention and more engagement in what's going on, the video game becomes easier. The controller that they're operating becomes more responsive.
In the NASA EVMS study, several off-the-shelf video games were linked to signal brainwaves through the handheld controller that guides the game's action. When the game was activated, the patient's brainwaves actually became a part of the game. It works like this. While a patient is playing a car racing game, for example, the sensors pick up high-frequency beta waves and low-frequency theta waves from the player's brain. If the biofeedback machine reads a higher percentage of theta waves, it sends a signal to the controller which lowers the top speed that the player's car can reach. To increase his top speed, the player must increase his percentage of beta waves. The player learns through trial and error to produce more beta waves and not limit his car's top speed. With enough training, changes in the patient's brain become automatic and can lead to improved attention and behavior all the time.
Pope's controller can be plugged into popular off-the-shelf game systems so that kids can train with a new game whenever they need a change. Powson compares this training to lifting weights in a gym.
What we're doing is we're creating an actual physical change in the way the brain functions, and that change will change the way you think no matter where you are and what you're doing.
Whether using traditional biofeedback or the new video game, all of the children studied made significant gains. They improved both their behavior and their ability to pay attention. But the kids who used video games were far more eager to show up at the clinic.
The children are very enthusiastic about the treatment, and some of them have been very disappointed to miss sessions. So here we have a method that is appealing enough for the children to want to continue spontaneously to do this type of training.
It may not be long until children with ADHD are told to study hard, get plenty of sleep, and play their video games.
That hasn't happened yet, by the way. So the key statement in there is that there was really no difference between the traditional way, if you can call neurofeedback traditional, that neurofeedback is delivered, which is just in displays, and the video game feedback, but the motivation or the incentive to continue training, which is a big problem with something that requires 30 or 40 sessions to benefit. And I'm often asked, why is NASA in the video game space? And here's a little known clause in the act that establishes our mission, that we're to use the bioengineering expertise that we have to develop programs, to develop technology designed to alleviate and minimize the effects of disability. Probably not something that you're aware of, that that's one of the things that's in Congress's mandate to NASA. Let's see. And we've gone further with this. I want to make sure I get to the right place here. And looked into using, if you're getting the idea that there's a closed loop that we're interested in, and we're interested in feeding back these signals for various purposes. In one case, it was to develop a method to evaluate indices. In this case, it's a training technology for biofeedback training.
While Dr. Pope is hooking Catherine up to the machine, let me tell you a little bit about the device. It's called the Zone, which stands for Zeroing Out Negative Effects. Basically, it uses biofeedback to help train a person to put their mind and muscles in sync while performing a specific task, like putting, for instance. Now, originally, NASA used this type of biofeedback training to help pilots stay alert throughout long trips, but it was found to work in many other ways, including sports.
The device works like this. An off-the-shelf golf putting practice system was modified to monitor either physiological conditions or brainwave functions within the subject. If the subject is too tense or has the wrong brainwave activity, several visual and auditory cues will give them feedback, which forces them to alter their present state. For example, if the subject is not at optimal levels, the putting surface will undulate, the hole size will decrease, and the mounting laser will swing wildly. But once the subject's muscles or brain waves are at optimal levels, the trainer will relax, allowing the subject to putt. The objective for trainees is a perfect putt every time, even under the most stressful conditions.
It's awesome. Like it makes you think about relaxing your body, and not just in your face, but the rest of you.
Tell us why NASA, or how NASA got involved with golf and biofeedback.
This research started out, we were looking at trying to improve the attention and cognitive state just for pilots and air traffic controllers, trying to help them do their job better. And what we discovered is some of the same responses we were getting with pilots while they were on the flight deck, or controllers while they were managing air traffic, was some of the same things that we saw from other research that was for golfers, for example. So we thought, well, we could apply some of this technology to helping pilots, because pilots and air traffic controllers really like golf. They like to do it in their recreation time. And this was a way that we can employ these techniques in a fun way, one that would make it very rewarding and keep them motivated, keep them wanting to keep doing this. And we've been highly successful with that. So we thought, well, let's just extend this and let's see if regular golfers would be interested in this technology as well.
Catherine, how has the Zone helped you, just in this time that you've been here?
Well, it's instant feedback on how relaxed your body is, and basically from head to toe. And when I'm over here and the laser's moving, as soon as I can calm everything down internally, then the laser stops and I'm able to putt at my best.
I realize I didn't explain what ZONE stood for. We always have to come up with an acronym. We are NASA. And ZONE stands for Zeroing Out Negative Effects. So one of the things we've done recently is start to move to off-the-shelf EEG systems, not for research, but just to demonstrate, to develop demonstration prototypes of our inventions. And we've moved to using the Wii video game system as opposed to the legacy Sony that you saw before. And so one of the things we have done recently is to look at the MindWave headset. And no one really knows, because it's proprietary information, what the mind wave headset does with the EEG, what sort of transformations it makes to the EEG to come up with an attention measure that they have. So what we did was use this EEG simulator to put in pure sine waves in the various bands, in the various frequency bands, and look at the response. And as far as we can tell, the same kinds of things are happening with their attention measure that is happening with our engagement index. But we can't be sure. We can just see that from the way it reacts with an EEG simulator. I think I'll skip over some of this unless anyone wants to see how the Wii video game interacts with this. Let's see. It's because I want to get to the in-progress crew state monitoring research. This is our suite of physiological measurement systems that we're using. There's both brainwave activity for central nervous system measures and physiological monitoring equipment for sympathetic or autonomic nervous system measures. And this is the data stream that we go through, and all the different steps which most people in the psychophysiological field appreciate. This aspect is something new for us, using machine learning, deep learning, those kinds of technologies to analyze the data so that we're moving into areas in addition to something like an engagement index, looking for models of particular states. And this is where most of the work is being done. And we're looking at what's called APPLES, attention-related human performance limiting states. And those were defined by an industry government group called CAST, and they've specifically pointed out these 4 states that need to be looked at because they're implicated in a lot of accidents and incidents. And the 2 that we're starting with are channelized attention, which kind of refers to my previous description of absorption, and startled surprise. And they'll be presented in January, so I'm not going to scoop Angela on this thing. Our next step is to move into this cockpit motion facility, which has a motion base that any of several cockpits can be put onto, and we're going to start doing our research in there. The simulator that you saw in the earlier picture was a fixed base research simulator. And the idea here, the next objective, is to spin back these kind of biofeedback ideas to training for attention management for crew, doing that in the flight simulation training context. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is very inspiring, and I think I get to ask the first question. So I'd like to hear, where do you think this is going 5, 10 years down the road? I mean, you've seen this growing over the last 30 years. Can you just pick your brain on where it's going 5, 10 years?
Well, actually, it's very exciting for me because, as you can see, I was working back in the dark ages. And to see the focus on this, and what has happened is that the technology has become much more capable. There's wearable mobile technology that can do a lot of these things, and it's going to do more, in my estimation. There will actually be EEG or brainwave measures that are not as difficult to apply as they have been and currently are. So the technology is going to improve so that these kinds of measures are going to be pervasive in all kinds of research. Because we need to know that implicit information, what's going on internal to the individual, as well as how they're behaving overtly. And that's our focus with the pilot assessment and the pilot training, is to see what their emotional and cognitive experience is in addition to their behavioral experience. And I would see this moving into any field that has to do with training or education, so that you're not only assessing some sort of overt measure, but you're also looking at these covert measures that are sometimes more powerful than what you can observe.
Do you mind just to, we had a short discussion. You visited the Tech Tree Lab yesterday. You gave me a small quote this morning. Can I have this quote on TV, please?
Okay. Well, I think what I said last evening, was that my wife tells me that I can always think of a lyric, usually from the 60s, for situations that I encounter. And looking at the lab last evening, the lyric that came to mind was from that philosopher Cat Stevens. I've been happy lately, thinking about the good things to come, and I believe it could be something good has begun, and that's what I think of when I see the Tech 3 lab, that something good has begun there, and something that's unparalleled in any other place that I know of, not even our facility.
Thank you.
Question over here.
Hi, I'm actually just curious on your thoughts on autonomous cars or just self-driving cars.
I don't know much about it. I do know that if there are self-driving cars, then our work is probably not relevant to that. We're really interested in situations where there are still human operators involved. And I'm not a prophet, so I can't predict whether there will always be human involvement in systems, but it looks that way to me, that at least at some stage of a system, there will be a human involved. If you're talking about UAVs, you're talking about remote piloting. Even those can become autonomous. But then you're talking about, if you step back, someone had to design those. There had to be a design situation. There had to be that kind of interaction with computers to actually develop the autonomous system itself. And so the technology, the human monitoring technology, could move from the operational context back into a design planning kind of context.
Thanks.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. I wanted to know that if we know that kids with ADHD, they have low attention to some of the tasks, but when they are super motivated and when they get into a task, they can have a higher attention index.
Yeah.
So do you think that this, the use of video games could have this bias because the kids liked video game and therefore it would be better to use a task that they did not like? What do you think about this?
Well, it probably would be something that you could supplement with. That kind of cuts to the core. That's a very perceptive question. What's been shown is that when children or anyone are playing video games, they tend to zone out and become absorbed in what's going on, and they produce a certain brainwave pattern. What we've done is basically try to counteract that, because we require, in order for them to succeed at the game, we require that they produce a brainwave pattern that's completely counter to what they're doing when they're zoning out. So it looks like that they are just playing a video game, but what they're being required to do is to produce, to develop, maintain a brainwave state that's very different from what a person usually assumes when they're playing a video game. Thank you for that question, because that enables me to explain. It's not just video game playing. It's video game playing with this added requirement.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and coming to Montreal. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.